Most people believe damage requires force, raised voices, or visible cruelty, because they have never studied what happens when pressure is applied quietly. The most effective breaking does not announce itself, because the mind resists attacks it can see, but slowly adapts to threats it cannot name. Human psychology evolves to fear isolation more than pain, because survival once depended on belonging, approval, and proximity to others. When connection is threatened, the nervous system begins negotiating before the conscious mind realizes a negotiation has started. This is why power rarely needs to shout, because authority becomes absolute when it feels inevitable rather than imposed. Beneath social rules and polite behavior, dominance is established through control of emotional reality, not physical territory. Whoever defines what is normal, acceptable, or worthy quietly controls the behavior of everyone seeking safety within that definition. The first invisible weapon is social isolation, because removing mirrors causes identity to blur and self-trust to erode. When a person is subtly excluded, ignored, or silence intensifies this process, because unanswered signals force the brain to generate explanations, usually self-blaming ones. The silent treatment is not absence, but presence, without response, which creates tension, without offering resolution. Over time, uncertainty becomes more exhausting than confrontation, and compliance begins to feel like relief. Gaslighting works by shifting reality in small increments. Never enough to provoke rebellion, always enough to provoke doubt. When perception is questioned repeatedly, confidence stops defending itself and starts asking for permission. Shifting standards deepen this erosion, because the rules of approval change just as they are learned. The target adapts faster, tries harder, and becomes more invested, while never arriving at stable ground. Withholding validation completes the cycle, because humans are conditioned to equate recognition with safety. Praise becomes scarce, conditional, and delayed, training obedience through emotional starvation rather than reward. Each of these tactics appears harmless in isolation, which is why they bypass the moral alarms of the conscious mind. Together, they form an environment where autonomy slowly dissolves without a single dramatic moment. Power operates most efficiently when the subject believes their suffering is self-generated. Manipulators understand that control is easier when the target participates willingly in their own diminishment. They do not rush, because time amplifies pressure more reliably than intensity ever could. Non-reaction's their shield, because emotional responses provide information, leverage, and resistance. Detachment confuses opponents, because it denies them feedback needed to adjust their behavior. Reframing turns cruelty into concern, dominance into guidance, and control into protection. Most people submit not because they are weak, but because they are conditioned to preserve harmony at personal cost. Social training teaches compliance before self-mastery, obedience before discernment, and politeness before perception. This conditioning makes manipulation feel familiar, even comforting, until the damage becomes undeniable. Awareness begins when patterns replace excuses and repetition replaces coincidence. The moment you see the structure beneath the behavior, its emotional grip starts to loosen. Internal mastery does not require aggression, only clarity and refusal to surrender inner authority. Emotional sovereignty begins when reactions are observed rather than automatically expressed. Silence, when chosen consciously, becomes defense instead of vulnerability. Detachment creates space, and space restores the ability to evaluate rather than appease. Accepting the shadow means recognizing your own capacity for control, submission, and resistance. Without denial, those who deny their darker instincts are easiest to dominate, because they outsource power to others. Self-mastery requires tolerating discomfort without rushing to resolve it through compliance. The nervous system can be retrained to endure uncertainty without collapsing into self-doubt. Once this tolerance develops, manipulation loses its urgency and begins to feel transparent. Dominance collapses when its psychological fuel is no longer supplied. This does not make you untouchable, but it makes you difficult to move without consent. True power is quiet, because it does not need to convince, threaten, or prove itself. It watches, waits, and acts only when alignment is lost. Those who understand these dynamics rarely explain them, because explanation dilutes advantage. Instead, they cultivate internal stillness that resists external pressure naturally. Breaking stops working when the target refuses to fracture internally. Emotional control is not suppression, but precision in where attention is placed. What you do not feed with attention eventually weakens, even if it once felt overwhelming. Awareness transforms manipulation from a personal failure into an observable mechanism. This shift restores choice where reflex once ruled. The world does not become kinder when you see clearly, but it becomes less confusing. Confusion is the primary environment where control thrives. Clarity is disruptive because it exposes invisible structures supporting dominance. Silence used deliberately reclaims psychological space that was previously invaded. Non-reactivity interrupts cycles designed to exhaust and destabilize. Detachment reveals which relationships depend on control rather than mutual presence. Understanding these dynamics does not require cruelty, only honesty about human nature. Power is neither good nor evil, but it is always operating. Those who deny its existence become subjects of it by default. The cost of awareness is the loss of comforting illusions about fairness and intent. What replaces them is a colder, more accurate understanding of behavior. This understanding does not promise safety, only agency. Agency feels uncomfortable at first, because it removes excuses, along with restraints. Over time, the need for validation fades, replaced by internal calibration. When approval is no longer required, manipulation loses its leverage. You begin to move slower, speak less, and observe more. Others may feel unsettled by this shift, because predictability has disappeared. The transformation is subtle, internal, and irreversible once fully integrated. From this point forward, nothing touches you unless you allow it.